Grand Rise, everybody. Happy day. Today is a very special day. My name is Shribad. Today is not my day, but it is a special day. For today is the day of Ethiopian Orthodox Christmas. There is a specific name for it. I really don't feel like pronouncing it right now. Why don't you Google it? And you can find out what that day is. Or what it's called in Amharic or Ge'ez. Now, I will say happy Ethiopian Orthodox Christmas because they're a little bit more accurate when it comes to guessing Jesus's birthday, right? They don't go by the Gregorian calendar. They go by a lunar calendar. So they're actually in a totally different year than we are. And their days and months are way different than what we are used to. So Tenestalin, to all of my peoples who celebrate Christmas on this day. Today is another special day for me. Today is my grandmother's birthday. And of course, we all have two grandmothers. One on our mother's side and one on our father's side. This grandma, whose birthday it is on my father's side, and I will call her Berbice. And the grandma on my mom's side, we're going to call her Miss Bim. Okay? I have an ancestor altar in my house. It's an ancestor and relationship altar. And it's funny because I know the day of my grandma Berbice's birth, but I don't remember the day of my grandma Miss Bim's birth. I remember the day of her death. And I realized yesterday and this morning when I woke up that the first oracles that I've ever met were my grandmother's. Let's go to Berbice first. I had a very awesome relationship with my grandmother Berbice. It was a very weird relationship. You see, two Capricorns getting together is a rare thing. Most Capricorns, they'll see each other, they'll be like, "What's up? You good? I love you," and walk the fuck away. You know, sometimes when two fires get together, it makes a bigger fire. I feel like Capricorns, they get their fires and their fires repel. But my grandma Berbice was no ordinary Capricorn. A jealousy was formed amongst my family members, and now I can look back and say that my father was one of those in team jealous of me and my grandma. They couldn't understand why she loved me so, especially when I didn't cling to her like they did. They all thought that she and I had this awesome relationship on God. So much so that 2 weeks ago I saw one of my first cousins who was just as close to my grandmother Berbice as I was. And she tried to kick some Bible shit on me, thinking that I would roll over and play dead like I did, or what she thought I did with our grandmother. She was sadly mistaken. Sad for her, not for me. And I had to finally explain to her Well, before I tell you what I explained to her, let me explain the relationship between me and my grandmother. My grandmother used to take me to church. She used to take me to Catholic church or some sort of Christian type of church. But it was one of those, priests where they wore the uniforms, kind of like the Catholic stuff, the Anglican or the Episcopalian, they got all formal and whatever. And my grandmother used to take me to these churches, and as soon as the preacher, priest, chaplain, whoever it was of the day, with the biggest uniform or the biggest hat or the blackest outfit with the white thing in the middle, whenever they started talking, I would immediately fall asleep. And when I would wake up, it would be right before they're done. If I woke up in between and they were still talking, I'd go to the bathroom, come back, lay down on my grandmother's lap and snore. Okay? I thought I snored. I guess I didn't. But whenever we were done, we would leave and we would walk and we would have the most amazing conversations about God. And she would always, after these conversations, take me to McDonald's. And back then, McDonald's was a luxury. It wasn't like something you go to every day. In the black community, McDonald's was something that you go to, if you got an A, straight A's on your report card, like, all right, we celebrating. You going to Mickey D's. Yay! Right? So it's like every Sunday, if we had a good enough conversation, she would take me to Mickey D's. And I realize now that these conversations were very contradictory to what she believed. All right? Because our conversations would be based on what the priest or whoever he was saying. And if I'm knocked out of sleep and I don't know what he's talking about, how can I carry on a whole conversation with my grandmother about God and scripture and whatever it is that he tried to, propaganda on people that I wasn't falling for? My cousins, they had no idea me and my grandmother would have these type of conversations. What they would see is her pulling out the Daily Word or the Upper Room or one of them books and making us read it. They would see my face go like, I don't want to read this crap. I'd rather go read Shakespeare and give my father a book report, okay? Oh, God. They would see that happen. But then once we opened up the thing and we read it, because first we had to read it to ourselves, right? We had to sit in silence and read it to ourselves. Then we had to read it to her. Then we had to explain what we thought about it. And usually my other cousins would just sit there in space looking at her, waiting for her to tell them what to say. And she and I would have like debates on what it is. I think she appreciated that so much. My grandmother stopped taking me to church when I was about 8 or 9 years old. One day she took me to church and I sat there and watched it. I didn't go to sleep. I didn't fall asleep. I did nothing. I sat there and hardly blinked and watched every word of what this man supposedly said. And she couldn't even look, and she couldn't even pay attention to what he was saying. She just looked at me the whole time. And when we were done, I still held a hand at 8 or 9 years old. I'm not going to stop holding my grandma's hand. Shoot, I held my grandma's hand when she was 100. Hey! But she said to me, what happened? What were you thinking the whole time? And I looked at my grandma and said, this ain't for me. And she was like, why? I said, why is it that God favors these white people so much that they can give the word and we just have to receive it, but I can't give the word? Why God don't like black people, Grandma? And she said, I don't know about you, but the Lord loves me. And I said, why? She said, because the Lord gave me you. So how can I say the Lord don't love me? I look at you and talk to the Most High every day. Every time I see you. I didn't know what she was talking about, but she never took me to church after that. After that, it was my parents' job to send a demon to whatever church would take this mutt child. I loved my grandma, even when I didn't love her anymore, even when I was mad at her and I blamed her for everything that my father was. I loved her more when I forgave her. You see, you have to consider a person's story. You have to consider who they were during their time. All right? My grandma in my time was completely different from my grandma in her time. You know, nowadays, you would think that a woman leaving 4 sons to fend for themselves is a bad thing. But back in the 50s, when a woman couldn't survive without a man, and if her husband died, that was the worst. And you had to become a single mother, which was the worst thing in the world you could be. You can't take a 19-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 14-year-old with you. Men. You can't take them with you. So the 3, she left with the oldest uncle, and the 4th one she sent to Jamaica to go live his life. By the time she got enough money and enough stature, because remember in those days women didn't even work really, and if they worked you only getting a couple of jobs, right? So my grandma became a teacher in Guyana. And when she got herself established enough, she started collecting her sons one by one, except for the ones who chose not to come to America. Let's put her to the side a second and go with my dreams from last night. I don't have a lot of dreams anymore. I don't have a lot of dreams that I remember. And I will thank Smoky Quartz for that. I'm getting to that another day. But I did have a dream last night. Very vivid, and I remember it very well. People always thought of me as different. I knew that I was an empath, but I didn't know where I got it from. And where I'm from, and the culture I was raised in, the community that I was raised in, there were Obeah women everywhere. And none of them would take me on, okay? When I walked down the street, the Obeah woman didn't bother with me, They moved over to the side, or they went across the street. If I went to an Obeah woman and said, I want to learn, they said, no, not you. And they gave me many reasons why not me. None of them I understood, None of them. Even when I encountered women who were possessed by different type of beings, spirits, and I would walk upon them and they would not take me on. And I didn't understand why. Back then I felt like nobody wanted me. God ain't want me. The devil ain't want me. Nobody want me. How stupid I was. So in my dream last night, I encountered some of these Obeah women that I met as a child. And they looked at me and they said, it's a good thing we ain't introduce you to Obeah, we ain't do this, we ain't do that. And I said, why not? Why y'all would run from me? Was I that much of a demon? And they said, no, you were well protected. So I'm thinking, it's my grandma Berbice that protect me. No. They said, no. It was not she who protect you, no. It was your grandmother, Miss Bim, who protect you. Now, let me explain something to you. My grandmothers were like night and day, okay? My grandmother Berbice did not curse. She tried to sit upright, prim and proper, and she did her best to be a lady. Or at least, show the world that. She was highly respected and knew all kinds of people from all walks of life. They all loved her and respected her like a mother goddess. It was a trait that my father would use for his narcissism to get his way. My grandmother, Miss Bim, on the other hand, she was a piece of work. That lady cussed, that lady screamed, that lady yelled, that lady ain't sitting there looking at you in no kind of meditation. She ain't no damn lady. She tell you it's a piece of fucking shite and get your strippity bill stuff away from fucking she before she gets something pelt you with it across your fucking head. That was my grandma, Miss Bim. You walk in the house and you did something, you're going to hear it right then and there. And you know all the names in the fucking book until you fix that shit. And it's crazy because the nickname was Sissy. And ain't nothing sissy about my grandma Bim. My grandma, Miss Bim, was 5'2", 108 pounds soaking wet. And if she raised a hand, the biggest Goliath mammoth bear would run from this woman. Hear me? But I never thought of her to be like no Obeah woman or nothing like that. You see, when I was with my grandma, Miss Bim, and I had to go to church on a Saturday, she'd be like, child, you should have stayed at my house from fucking Friday. If you stayed in my house on Friday, you wouldn't have to go with them people on Saturday. That's your fault. Not mine. Don't trouble me with the thing. And it got to the point where, my family got hip, so they would not let me see my grandmother until Sunday. And then she would always crack jokes on me like, oh, you ain't up in there, right? They kick you out? They kick you out, right? What you tell them this time? You tell them demon bees? Good. Tell them again. Go back in there and tell them, I don't care if they kick you out. That was my grandma, Miss Bim. But once I woke up from this dream, I realized she was an oracle. You see, my grandmother, Miss Bim, lived in a wooden shack. Right up to the point where they had to put her in the nursing home. And the only reason why they put my grandma in the nursing home was so that her sister, who was more senile and had a worse case of Alzheimer's than my grandmother, would go get taken care of. My grandmother chose to live in a wooden shack. She didn't have to, because my mother's side of the family was very well known, very prominent. They had money. My grandmother could have lived wherever she wanted. She chose to live in the wooden shack where it was built up for her until she had to help out his sister. All right, because it's my sister, but I wouldn't do it for none of honor, none of on all. That's what she would say. But right next to the wooden shack, right next to it, was a tree. And this tree was massive. If you walked around the tree, you would see that the roots grew up under the wooden shack. So my grandmother's wooden shack wasn't even. It was like off a little bit because of this tree. And she didn't care nothing. She wanted to stay right there. She not move. And my grandmother would go. Well, she wouldn't go. My grandmother would be like, hey, go play in the dirt. Go play outside in the dirt. And I'll just be like, this lady, whatever. And I would go play in the dirt. I would go play by the tree. I would dig up things. I'd dig in the ground and look for the worms and look at the snails and look at the slugs and look at the centipedes. This was before I became a girly girl and got afraid of them things. And one day I was digging in the dirt near the big tree, and my grandmother came out and she said, when you just play in this dirt, where you want to be? What you doing? I said, I want to grow a tree just like this one. And she said, you want to grow a tree like this one? Where's your seed? I said, well, Grandma, you never give me a seed, And she said, open up your hand. I opened up my hand and she gave me a seed. I didn't know what seed it was. I ain't even asked what the seed is. So she said, put the seed in there. And I put the seed in. I packed it up. And then my grandmother slapped me in the back of my head. And I started to cry. I'm like, Grandma, why you slap me? I cried, crying. And she go, well, you need some water for the dirt. She said, how long you think it's going to take for this tree to grow? I said, well, maybe 10 years. She said, 10 years? I thought you were smart. I said, what do you mean? She said, I thought you were smart. You ain't smart? Girl, look at this tree, hey, and you tell me how long you think your tree going to take. So she walked inside, she sat down and went about her business. And I'm looking at this tree, I'm looking at this massive tree. Yo, one of the stumps of the tree was twice the size of me. And I used to lay against the stump and just fall asleep. And I laid by that big stump and I looked at the stump and I said, where is stump Annie? And I looked down in the ground and I started digging. And I realized, oh gosh, I'm going to be digging forever. And I walked inside of the shack and I said to my grandma, I said, Grandma, how long did it take this tree to grow? Did it take 1,000 years? And she looked at me, she said, wait, why you say 1,000 years? I said, Grandma, these stumps is big. The roots must be deep. So Grandma, did it take 500 years for the stump and the roots to grow? And then it took another 500 years for the tree to get so tall and big? That's why it take 1,000 years for the tree to grow. She said, well, I don't know about 1,000. I ain't that old, child. But I do know it took more than 10 years. She said, when you just put your hand in the dirt, what is that? What are you doing? I said, I'm cultivating it. And this was around 9 and 10 years old. She said, yeah, you could cultivate. You want to manifest something, you have to cultivate your foundation. You have to ground it properly. And then we put the seed in here, and you put your little water in there, and God gonna put water on it too. But we only look for the changes we see on the top. We don't see what happens in the bottom. And how could the tree grow big and strong if the roots know nothing? You have to spend time to make sure the roots stay there. They grow and they're strong to feed up the rest of the tree. So 10 years for a tree like what I have? You think God calculate 10 years? I said, well, Grandma, I don't know what God calculate. She said, well, you're going to have to go ask God, Because I only deal with what God showed me. I don't deal with these conversations with God, these one-way backwards ass conversations with God that the people do when they go to church, when they deal with foolishness. I don't deal with them. I talks to God and God show me. Stop all your foolishness conversations with God. You talk too much to God, and God don't let God speak to you. And it take time for God to speak to you, girl. God don't speak to you overnight all the time, You have to be a very well-connected person to be able to have God show you almost instantaneously what you're talking about. So when you put your hands in this earth and you're playing with it and you're looking at the caterpillars and the worms and you're letting them move on, you're letting them live, you're not killing them, and you put the seed in here and you took your 2 pieces of tears and you put it in there, you have to wait and see what God show you, girl. That's what you have to do. I woke up this morning and I got my bracelets. I put them to the sun to clear. And I got my dandelion root water and I put it to the sun to purify. And I went to my mom's house. And I chilled with her for a little bit. And then I came back. And my doorman says, hey, you got a package. And I got a package from my teacher. And I got a book. And the book is on birthdays. And I'm not going to look at my birthday. I went straight to my grandma Berbice's birthday. And I never thought my grandma Berbice was an oracle. And I never thought my grandma Miss Bim was an oracle. But they were oracles. Let's read. On this day, the ancient goddess Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess who sustained the spirits of the dead, was honored on this day. Those with the birthdays on this day, January 7th, are sociable and friendly enough to garner people's respect and admiration without sacrificing their own privacy or independence. When I tell you I call my grandmother Secret Squirrel, child, please. As one of these Capricorns, you have a sensitivity and apparent vulnerability that endears you to others. And I really think that's why people like my grandma, because she was the best listener. Or at least she looked like she listened. Yours is a highly spiritual nature that resonates with the suffering and injustices in the world. Mentally, you're both logical and intuitive, an unusual combination that produces the odd dichotomy of a scientific mind with an artistic temperament. Your idiosyncratic approach to things and the occasional tendency to isolate yourself can cause you to feel lonely or cut off from the world around you. It's not that you don't enjoy company, it's just that you've always followed your own path. You know what you want to do, and you refuse to be sidetracked by extraneous circumstances. Inherently clever and intuitive, you're shrewd about people and understand human foibles. Foibles. Let's pronounce that properly. Many of those born on January 7th have psychic skills and mystical or occult interest. Well, if my grandma did, she sure didn't tell me. She probably passed it over to me. If this applies to you, you should take the time to develop these areas. Sometimes you comprehend more about what everyone else is feeling than you do about your own emotions. And I feel that's my grandma to a T. You yearn for love and intimacy, yet remain aloof unless you feel totally secure with the other person. You'll put off commitment until you're certain that the relationship is right. But when you make a promise, you stick to it. If that wasn't my grandma Berbice, I don't know what was. And if Ethiopian Orthodox Jesus was really born on this day, hey, I can see that too. So thank you, Grandma Berbice. Thank you, Grandma Miss Bim. Thank you for being my very first oracles. Thank you for allowing me to be me and loving that we are so opposite. I guess I can be grateful that my grandma was secure enough with me to give me hugs all the time, give me kisses all the time, as she taught me how to play the piano. Even when she asked me if I want a coffee and I said, ew, no. And I hated tea. I love tea now. Still can't deal with coffee. Happy birthday, Grandma Berbice. May I find the understanding that you always had. May I find the intuitiveness that you didn't broadcast, or the wisdom that was just shown and you didn't have to talk about it. May I be loved and respected like you were, and no one knew why they did it. They had more to do with you just being cute, Grandma. I promise. Thanks, Grandmas. I love you. Blessed Earth Strong.